Scott enters the arena, we'd like to give him a warm round of applause. Scott, thanks so much. I'm going to quickly read his bio. It's coming. Scott believes everyone deserves a more perfect customer experience.
True.
With this in mind, he and a few folks much smarter than himself started FullStory, a radically new type of web analytics company that after about 10 minutes of implementation captures every user event, really all of them, unlocking session playback, real-time search, and a natural way to explore user data. We use it and we love it. Today, FullStory has over 80 employees, growing quickly. They've raised $27.2 million from investors we've likely all heard from, which includes Google, Salesforce, Kleiner Perkins. Prior to FullStory, Scott spent 6 fantastic years at Silverpop, which was acquired by IBM. Prior to Silverpop, he served as COO at Innuvo, a tiny web technology company that was acquired by Google. So there's a fabric there. He also spent some time at Noro-Moseley Partners, the Southeast's oldest and largest venture capital firm. The Georgia Tech and Wharton MBA school, or grad school, found a love of lacrosse later in life, which is interesting. He coaches 2 youth teams. To keep his skills sharp, Scott plays in an old guy lacrosse league. Seriously, details can be found at oldguylacrosse.com. Let's welcome Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take it away, David.
All right. So I love interviewing entrepreneurs and hearing their story. And so the first question is always, give us the current elevator pitch for FullStory today.
I think the operative word there is current, because I don't know if other entrepreneurs know this, you're always workshopping some new variant of the pitch. Last week's variant was if I was at a birthday party of 9-year-olds, I would say that we make the web less frustrating for people. And I actually stole part of that from my good friend Melanie Chrissy. The more detailed version of that is that FullStory is John sort of evoked with a very simple web script. We record everything. I like to say no company records more data per user visit than FullStory. I can say this with confidence because we record all, and you cannot have more than all. All right, so what? So you have a big pile of data, Scott. What do you do with it? Well, we are fortunate to have this really smart group of ex-Google engineers, and we sort of took a playbook from Google to say, let's take this pile of data, let's index it in a way that anyone within a business that needs to understand interaction about the customer can quickly find it. They can quickly understand exactly what is going on, and that means high-level analytics and high-fidelity playback. You can settle any bet you want by saying, look, this is exactly what the user was doing. You can then understand that pattern of behavior in order to really just set and monitor something. So I want to know what my conversion rate looks like, and if it ever dips from 50% to 40%, tell me immediately. So then I can go back in and understand what happened and repeat that pattern over and over again. And that's not just a proposition for a web analytics department or a product management department. Our goal really is to empower everyone with a stake in customer experience. And that's support people, and that's engineers, and that's product managers, and that's marketers, and that's salespeople, and that's customer success people. And so far, so good. We've got about 2,500 paying customers to date. We have many thousand more free customers. And they're sort of using it in that capacity. So that was longer than an elevator pitch I get, but it could be at a tall building.
Like the Salesforce Tower.
Yeah, like the Salesforce Tower. Yeah, that's right.
So we all love the successful entrepreneur. Everything's working great, tons of money in the bank, thousands of paying customers.
Yeah.
But we all know that it's not a straight line path to success.
No, it's definitely not, and let's caveat the word success, right? Like, don't confuse raising money with success. Nobody gets excited when you refinance your house, right? So, yeah, we're not successful yet.
So, FullStory is not the original name of the business.
No.
There's a backstory here that involved monetology. Tell us about that initial part of the journey.
Yeah. Moneology, sometimes people would say. So let's see. So I'm going to walk it all the way back to 2005. And in 2005, I was down at the ATDC, right? Remember that thing, the ATDC, before you started this? We were down there. I had this cube. I was working in a cube. In the cube next to me were these two brilliant computer science entrepreneurs, and they were working on a company, and I was working on a company. And we'd go to Moe's every day, and we just kind of, like, I was the business guy, and they were the computer guy. I eventually joined those two guys and went to work for them. And then in a very fortunate turn of events, we hit Google's radar. Google came in and acquired that company. My partners, Bruce and Joel, went on to go lead that Google engineering office. I went to this company, Silverpop, and was jealous that we didn't get to work together for very long. So every year, once a quarter, I'm pinging those guys, hey, happy at Google, you still want to be there? Let's do something new, 7 years later, we all quit our day jobs, and we really didn't have a clear idea of what we wanted to do. I know a lot of entrepreneurs get going saying, this is my vision for the world, this is the pain that we're going to solve. That was not how we got going. It was really, we wanted to start a company, and we liked working with each other, and we'll kind of try to figure that out. I had some ideas based on my time at Silverpop, some opportunities in the marketing area. These were not super crisp ideas. These were pains I had come up with. And so day one of the company, I kid you not, I went to the Google office. I picked them up. They had their boxes in the hand. They got right in the car, and we drove down to the beach. And we were going to do a 3-day offsite to talk about, what's this new company going to be? And we were a very goal-minded group. One of the goals of that car ride was to do a pre-mortem. Why did the company fail? And let's tear through that. Let's get all of that out of the way so when those things arise, we'll know how to deal with them. The other thing we had was we were going to name the company. And let me tell you, trying to name a company in 3 days is not probably a recipe for success. So we had all of these lists of all of these names. One of them was, what was the name of the site? Because I remember sending it to you.
Brand Bucket.
Brand Bucket. Yeah, we found the site Brand Bucket, where you could buy decent .coms. We really wanted a .com. I think this was pre.io. And so we found Monetology as a name. And we were like, well, monetology kind of sounds like money, and we want to make money. So yeah, let's do that. And we named it Monetology. We got to work on the idea that I was kicking around in my head, which was basically agile development was a thing. And there were some software companies, Rally, version 1. These were companies that had made a go of supporting agile product development. I sort of felt like marketing was completely chaotic. There could be this thing, agile marketing. We could build some tools similar to Rally to help support that. This was not a particularly good idea, quite honestly, but we went ahead and built it anyway. And I don't know how long of a story you want here.
No, this is good.
Okay, you let me know if you just kind of make a noise. We got to work on this product that was kind of building agile marketing software. As we're building that, about 3 months into the life of the company, Google ended up closing that Google engineering office here in Atlanta. And so we had this opportunity to go get some of Bruce's old colleagues and bring them to work for us, which was a crazy idea. Like, we weren't venture-backed. We were funding this out of our pocket. But one of the things I've come to really believe is anytime you can get an opportunistic hire, you do it, right? Hire good people anytime you can, even if you don't have the money. That has served us well. And I have only regretted passing on people where we were being too conservative, and they were great people. And so just lesson learned there. Where was I? So we ended up hiring 4 of our colleagues and starting to work on this product. And we were trying to like pay the rent. We ended up moving into MailChimp for a little while. There's a little subchapter there. We launched this product. We couldn't call the product Monetology because everybody just thought that was a horrible name. So Monetology became the name of the LLC. We launched this product, Homebase, Homebase.io. I guess IO was ready at that point in time. And what happened was we got some people using the product. Maybe somebody in this room used Homebase. And we would see this pattern of behavior where engagement would look like this, and it would kind of turn, and then it would go down. And sometimes it would kind of streak up and streak down, and sometimes it was low, and we kept asking ourselves, what is going on in this product that we can't see? Like, I just want to understand what they're doing in the product. And the paradigm of the day was Google Analytics or Mixpanel or Omniture, where you really had to instrument events, right? If somebody clicked on this button, go put some code next to this button to phone home, log an event. We can look at a chart or a graph to understand engagement. And that got us thinking about a couple things. I mean, one, we were not sleeping at night. We knew something was wrong in that product, and maybe this wasn't the right product, and that's a really hard place to be. But how we could answer that set of questions for that product led us to the idea that eventually became FullStory. And so,
How important was the MailChimp consulting relationship in figuring that out?
it was, it's a good question. So in a way, it was helpful. The MailChimp consulting agreement gave us the life to give us time to figure it out. It was helpful in that we were doing, basically what we did, there were 7 of us, 8 of us. We would rent 2 of ourselves to MailChimp full-time to do whatever consulting project they wanted, and the rest of us would work on the product. Some of the work we were doing for MailChimp at the time was related to their customer support stuff, and they've got a ton of customers, and they got a ton of support stuff. And we would ask them some probing questions about how you're understanding what your customers are doing in their product. And it turns out they were really facing the same set of challenges we were with our product. And I'm like, gosh, if MailChimp is struggling with this, and we're struggling with this, maybe other people are. And so we actually put together a minimum viable product pitch deck. And I walked around the halls here before it was even done, and remember pitching SalesLoft, CallRail, who else? Hubert, I saw Hubert, I remember pitching Hubert and Melanie. Mm-hmm. And I set out this problem statement. How do you understand what your customers are doing? How do you know whether your customers are frustrated? If these are problems for you, here's an image of what this product might look like. And I would end it with, we're building it now, and I'm charging, and I would just kind of pause, $150 a month for it. Would you buy it? And they were like, yeah, of course, $150. And that was the big difference for us. It's like hearing people would pay for it was enough for us to call pivot.
So let's dig into Homebase IO just a little bit more. Because I know there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. Mm-hmm. How did you identify that it was a nice to have? You talked about, obviously you had some early traction and then the usage would drop off. Were there other indicators or other signs that it wasn't going to work?
There's so many indicators, and it was the hardest thing to come to grips with, because when you're starting a company, you're told, because you read it all the time, that it's going to be hard, and people are going to tell you this thing isn't going to work. And knowing whether they're right or you're right is a really, really hard thing to do, because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to persevere through all of their challenges.
I have an MBA.
I have an MBA. I mean, certainly I'm smart.
You know the answer. From the president.
The president. I knew you were going to say
mater.
it. I mean, yeah. That's not. I throw up into the microphone. So there was one anecdote, just to really paint the picture. We tried to raise money on Homebase, and we had
pitched me, and I passed, and I shouldn't have passed.
I think you put just a ridiculous offer in front of me, as I recall. There was an email. I'll dig it up.
I passed because I didn't like the idea.
Well, maybe you passed.
I shouldn't have passed.
Maybe you
passed.
About the person. There was some. Maybe it was FullStory. Anyway, we don't have to get into details. I would have passed too. Every venture person in the world passed on it. Fortunately for us, because if we had accidentally raised money on it, we would have felt stuck to it, and we wouldn't have felt like we could pivot. So again, MailChimp helpful there. We got every meeting with every venture company we could want to, because we have a good lawyer, and he has good connections, and the Google credibility team was enough to get us in the door. And I remember meeting with this very famous venture guy that has a very famous SaaS blog, and he's British. And we did our pitch, we showed the demo.
He's got a good first name, too.
He's got a good first name. He does, yes. Mm-hmm. And he's got a brother out there, and so we probably narrow it down. And he said, gentlemen, and he walked up to the whiteboard after we had done our pitch. let me say, it's rare we see a team this good. It's rare. I'm going to give you an A. We're like, all right, we got an A. This was one of our first pitches, by the way. The market you're talking about, it's marketing. It's a fantastic market. It's a huge opportunity. Marketing automation's on the rise. I'm going to give that an A. Yes. Your product, your idea, it's rubbish. It's absolutely horrible. I will give you money not to work on this idea. I mean, it was almost that strong. I kid you not, it was almost that strong. And we were like, yeah, that guy doesn't get it. You know, I mean, he totally got it. He was right. Workflow software is a horribly difficult category of software. And we didn't, you know, we didn't know. Advice back to entrepreneurs is listen to good advisors, and if they're telling you it's a bad idea, it's probably a bad idea. Yeah.
So we were having a dinner one night around Venture Atlanta, and Scott was sharing some of the stories of going from Homebase to this potential pivot. And he looked over and he said, hey, there's a domain out there that's, you know, for sale. We have thefullstory.com,
Yep.
and I can buy fullstory.com for 20 grand.
Yep.
Should I buy that domain? And then he immediately said, don't go buy it first.
Yeah, I knew you, because you could.
Was it worth paying the 20 grand?
Oh, I actually ended up paying 30 grand for
You
it.
paid 30 grand for the
It
domain.
was the best money I've ever spent, ever. Because it just, yeah, I mean, it lent a level of credibility beyond us. In fact, the first thing that we did when we raised our seed round, I had been in negotiations for that domain with the guy. It's like a famous internet broker. And if he had got wind that we were a funded venture company, it would have immediately gone from 20 grand to 200 grand. So I was so scared that was going to happen. I had my fake Gmail account and all of those things. And so it came in and got it.
Awesome. So you decided to pivot from Homebase.io to FullStory. What was the next step in the business? How did you get those first 10 paying customers?
I think we had some of those first 10 simply from the pitch deck that we were doing, because we leaned into that problem minimum viable deck very aggressively to say, we are building this thing right now, and we will deliver it to you on such and such a date. And so we said we would not have a free customer for that when we went out of the gate. One of the things Homebase was, by the way, was free. It was a free tool. And I can't say that there is no one right path, mind you. I strongly believe that. So you do you. But I think that starting with free and then going to paid is a harder route, and you can fool yourself. We did start with a low price point and get some skin in the game, and then you can always backfill into free if you want to. But we had a customer before we even launched it. And
so when you say a customer, is that somebody that verbally said they're going to use it, or did they actually sign some agreement?
Yeah, I mean, it was handshake. I felt good about it. And it played out right. Yeah, it was. And so I think we went, you know, the day we launched was the day that that customer started paying us. Like we made that credit card transaction go through before we turned it on, which was kind of cool, just so we could feel like we were getting paid for it. And then it was me just going around town for the most part, quietly getting customers, you know, my good friend Rigger, my good friends at SalesLoft, et cetera, using FullStory before we did a real launch. So we, on the back of, let's call it 10 to 20 paying customers, not paying much, mind you, but they were paying us. The product, the team, we were able to go raise a seed round with Tom Noonan and Google Ventures, and that was just a quick seed round. I don't even think we had to get on a plane with Google Ventures to get that seed round done. And then we launched it. We had our tech crunch moment. It was kind of open, try to buy at that point, and it just started working. I mean, that's not to say it just kept working, but the curve, that was when the curve really started to make the right move.
So early on, you had a key sales hire, a gentleman near and dear to my heart, Derek Grant.
It's great. Yes.
He was one of the best sales leaders that I've ever met and had a chance to work with at Pardot, now at SalesLoft,
Yep.
and in between at FullStory.
Yep.
And so from a strategy point of view, you initially wanted to use salespeople and acquire customers with more of a outbound and inbound strategy, and then you wanted to go more self-service for a while and then come back around to a mix of the both. So talk through some of that thought process and what you learned.
Yeah. So to say that we actually knew what we wanted is probably overstating it. Like, we had a bunch of ideas, and we knew the typical software as a service playbook was you have fantastic VP of sales, which we were able to do, and go to market with that playbook over and over again. We were a bit of an interesting organization because I think sort of the beginning soul of the company was really product-centric. Go back to the 8 founders of the company. 6 of them were hardcore engineers. 1 was a designer, and 1 was me. And so I was the only person that I think had ever carried a sales bag ever. And I think layering in sales too early for us was a lesson learned, because the go-to-market approach we really wanted to emulate, right, wrong, or indifferent. We looked at companies like ExactTarget, we looked at Zendesk, we looked at New Relic, this idea of let people try it, let people buy it, get a good base of customers. Like, we wanted lots and lots of customers, and we can refine our product by having lots and lots of customers. We'll know the use cases, we'll hear it from our customers, word of mouth will start to kick in because people are liking the product we're building, they'll change jobs, they'll take their tools with them. For all of those reasons, that was always what we wanted from the beginning. And as you know, there can quickly be a natural tension between sales, who needs to carry a number at a higher price point, and a product that is public at a low price point. And we ran into that tension almost immediately. And I think we got to the point where it was just, Derek saw it, we saw it, where it was like, we're just not ready for this yet. We need to cut our teeth further and get more customers under belt, find the soul of this product, and then we will continue to inch upstream as the product is better suited for that. I think the other thing that is unique to FullStory is we catch a whole bunch of data. And we were still working out how to deal with that story in bigger customers with deeper pockets who are like, how much data are you getting? And how are you going to protect this? And who are you guys? And I just think there's a long cycle there. Since then, we definitely have leaned into sales.
And so from a go-to-market point of view, obviously you have sales reps, you have inbound leads, presumably.
Yes.
How important has the word of mouth, the second order revenue been at this stage of the business? So getting people that go from one job to the next and then buy it at the next company.
Yeah, I mean, it's been crucial for the success. And I would say it still carries a bulk of our revenue. Probably like a majority of our revenue still comes from people that had tried the product and bought the product without sales intervention. We only added, really leaned into sales in May of last year. I would say we had a couple guys that were doing some things. I was running sales cycles when we could, but we hired a VP of sales in May of last year and started building out something that looks much more traditional. SDR team, inside sales organization, experimenting with outside, getting on planes, that sort of thing.
So you raised money from Kleiner Perkins, one of the most famous venture firms of all time. And so presumably to raise money from one of the most successful firms of all time, you had to paint a really big vision.
Yeah.
A really big total addressable market, something that can be a large, meaningful company.
Yes.
What is that vision? What is that market? What can this thing become?
Well, it's big. So let's start with how many companies care about the digital experience, both web and native mobile, right? There are a lot. Okay, that's good. How do they care about that today, and whose budget can I go and get? One thing that we've seen and we've been able to ride at the backs of, and you are seeing sort of a new emergence. Actually, I'll take half a step back. Remember in the email days, I know you remember this, is there was email marketing, which was a nice, healthy industry. There was web analytics, and there was landing pages. And in between was sort of this swirling of companies that found an interesting superset of those features aimed specifically at B2B companies, right? And there was a new set of buyers, a new set of budget. It created a new industry. So as we see it today, product teams in both e-commerce companies and SaaS companies, there is that swirling, right? They've got some analytics tools over there that help them a little bit. There's some UX tools that help them a little bit. They haven't traditionally had a huge budget with those tools, but that is starting to happen now, where product managers, VPs of products, customer experience is becoming a buying center in the organization. We get to go capitalize on that, and the venture guys appreciate that. The venture firms are so sophisticated now, they're tracking spaces that they see potential in, and they think the product center is a good one. I agree with them. But as you look at it, in the big picture, right, FullStory, again, more data than anybody else out there. Our customers are adding additional information to that database, usernames and customer IDs and customer segments. It's in a very searchable Google-like index that is accessible not just to one department, but multiple departments around the organization. So whose budget do we start to chip away at? Well, over time, traditional web analytics is something you start to be able to see. I mean, the paradigm of having to instrument events in EVARs seems absolutely bananas to me. We think true analysts want to be in a BI tool on top of a data warehouse. Great, FullStory has a data export edition. We're the fastest way for you to get big data in your database, and your digital team can go do what they want to. What about everybody else that kind of logs into Google Analytics occasionally? There's FullStory. It has all the answers available for you. Oh, that's pretty interesting. You look at lots of other areas. There's applications performance monitoring. Now, I'm not going to say we're getting here over tomorrow, but over time, you look at it and say, who has the best insight into what's going on in the client? Well, again, we got more data than anybody else. We're collecting all of the sorts of things like errors and timing events in JavaScript wonkiness. There's a great thing there. Then you start to pan back a little bit and just look at, take e-commerce companies alone and go back. We were at a customer a couple weeks ago, big customer, and they said, prior to FullStory, our revenue dipped from 50% to 40% for one day, and it cost us millions, and we have no idea why that happened, none. Okay, well, FullStory is not far away from letting you just monitor that information. If you see a dip, we tell you that there's a dip. But then, because we have all of this data and we start to monitor all the heuristics that could lead into that differential, we've got these kind of goofy marketing names, but very, very powerful concepts in FullStory today, where we look at the heuristics of what a user is doing. We've got something we call a rage click, where a user is just hammering on the mouse in frustration over and over again, right? I guess it blew the microphone guy's ear out. We can look at rage clicks and mouse thrashing and errors on page and page load time and JavaScript wonkiness on this browser from Georgia, and then when revenue dips and something over there spikes, we're telling that team, go right there, and you'll see exactly what got wrong so you can fix it. And then you take it a step further, and you start to see those patterns across customers to say, this is creeping up, do something before it starts to impact. And that's true.
And powerful.
It's powerful.
So you go and you pitch Kleiner Perkins, and they say, oh, this is amazing, here's a check? Or is it a lot of back and forth and a lot of educating them on what the TAM could be and what the opportunity is? Or did they get it pretty quickly? Yeah,
it went pretty quickly. We were fortunate. We had some good advice on how to run a process, which was, so I told you the story about when we went out the first time. We were just complete clowns. We had no idea what we were doing, and we learned from that first experience how to do it the next time. We ran a process. We had the pitch down. We got the horses on the track. We tried to tell the horses where the other horses were. And in that world, if one horse moves to the lead, other horses try to catch up in a hurry. And Kleiner in particular, I grew up in the venture age, like I'm older, and John Doerr was like the coolest guy. If you had baseball cards for venture capitalists, if that was a thing, like I would want the John Doerr rookie card. That he was just like the coolest. And when we got to pitch Kleiner Perkins, and John was in the room, and a little sidebar story, we had a couple term sheets already, and we felt pretty good about where we were. We thought that Kleiner was a little bit behind in the process. We didn't think that they were going to get there in time. And so there was some time left over in the meeting, and nobody had any questions. And one of the things we did hear a few times is, what about Atlanta? I mean, is that going to be a problem? And we always addressed it. We feel good about our Atlanta story. But I said to the room at Kleiner, I was like, so we've got some time left. Is there any questions? Do you want to talk about the Atlanta thing? And John slapped the table and said, we love doing deals in Atlanta. And it was like, that was cool. That was just a savor moment for us. But it went fairly quickly.
That's awesome. So you raised the money, continued to expand the team. What's been some of your latest challenges with the business? What are some of the things that are top of mind today?
That's good. So we accomplished a ton last year. That was a big year for us. And I think we are now considered a growth company, which was not something that I was aware was a thing and really prepared for. Like that it was so clearly categorized in a way where there's a different set of investors that are paying attention to you. And rightfully there is a different set of challenges for your business that show up when you hit this growth stage of the business. It was to paint a picture, the beginning of the year, truly, it was like January 6th. Everybody had been on holiday. We came back. All right, let's get the year going. What are we going to do? And my energy level was just super low. And my partner, Bruce's energy level was also low. We were just super flat on that first day back. Well, let's just go to lunch. And we went to lunch and we started talking it out. And I think we had played the role of, venture, sort of this company trying to make a go of something, to make some fire and get something going so long that we had done that. There was this minor identity crisis on what our job was anymore, because our job used to be all the jobs. We would just run around and any fire we put out, sell this, that. And we realized we had to evolve our own thinking of our own role as the company stepped into this new phase. I know that sounds like a high-level thing, but it's for real, man. So one of our annual objectives for the year as we run OKRs was, I'm trying to think exactly how we phrased it, operate as a wannabe public company, is what we said. We can't predict whether we're going to be a public company at any point, but we know that we can start to pretend that we want to be one. And that was really as much about Bruce and I saying, what would we have to do in order to pretend we were the guys on the quarterly calls? What sort of measurements do we need in place? What sort of management structure do we need in place? And that gave us a new set of challenges that got us energized about the year ahead. I don't know. So now we're doing all of those things, and it is an entirely new set of challenge. Like the organizational, I think we just got to about 100 people, and there's just this huge inflection when you hit 100 people in terms of their...
Strange, right? When you walk down the hall,
it's like,
you see somebody that you've seen him or her before, but you don't remember their name, but they work for you.
Yeah. I didn't interview that person. Like, I didn't interview that person. Did somebody interview that person?
It's very strange.
I hate it. It's strange and I hate it because I loved the familyness of it. So I'm trying to figure out how we can continue to propagate that.
All right, so the next question's a really tough one. Privacy has been in the news for a long time now, GDPR.
Yeah.
I know FullStory, because it captures all the information, might or might not capture some stuff that might or might not be privacy related. What's the current thinking and strategy?
Well, I should have said, yeah, we catch all the information, but with a huge caveat. Nothing you don't want us to collect, right? So there's an easy mechanism to exclude any sensitive information, but that just doesn't sound as good when I'm hand-waving about everything, to put that caveat in there. So actually GDPR is something that probably lots of people in the room are dealing with. We looked at GDPR in Q4 of last year, knowing that it was coming. We have lots of European and other other nations outside of Europe that are asking those questions. We looked at it as here is an opportunity for us to put some distance between us and our competitors, right? So for us, that takes the form of technology. We're a bunch of product people at heart. We look at how can a product help solve that problem. And so without going into painstaking details, we created some interesting API hooks that will let us record information, but upon getting consent, actually then start to record the information. So it's sort of an interesting, nuanced way of doing it that we can now, when we're in a competitive situation, say, look, we're thinking about GDPR on multiple levels. Of course, you can exclude sensitive information. We don't want it. But when it comes to consent, that's something you need to think about. We've got a technical answer to that. So then we start to put marketing information out there about that. So the next time somebody Googles session replay GDPR, FullStory is top of the stack, and we can feel good about that story. Okay, so that's GDPR. But privacy, we actually feel GDPR is a good thing, believe it or not. I think that the web got a little ahead of itself on all the data mining and stuff like that. To be crystal clear, we're collecting data, but we are not, our customers are not allowed to share that data in any way that would not be in their users' best interests. We've got this fantastic acceptable use policy. It really is worth a read, believe it or not. It's not very legally. And it calls it out specifically. FullStory is for good and for improving your customer's experience. This is not for harvesting data in some sort of evil way to put it on an ad exchange. We think most of the GDPR stuff is really aimed around that. And so we lean into the privacy stuff. We do not want our customers collecting information that their customers don't want them to have. We think our customers should be proud of the fact that they are recording all of the information with the proper guardrails and procedures in place in order to improve customer experience. We had some customer tweet something the other day. I assume it was a customer that said something along the lines of, wouldn't it be a great world if every company had FullStory on its site because just the web experience would be so much better? That's the spirit that we think about when it comes to privacy.
So from the entrepreneurial journey, we've talked about some great lessons learned so far. Talked about potential naming conventions at the company name versus product name.
Yeah.
We've talked about perhaps not raising money until you figure out what you want to be when you grow up, so you're not locked into a path that might or might not work. We've talked about potentially doing some consulting work for a larger company to buy time to figure out things. Mm-hmm. We've talked about some of the things that have worked on the FullStory side. So thinking about the entrepreneurial journey, both yours and others that you've seen, what are some other things that come to mind in terms of advice that you would give to other entrepreneurs?
Let's see. So these are the ones that immediately popped into mind. So if you are not sleeping, pay attention to the thoughts that are going on in your head in the middle of the night. I know it sounds a little bit cheesy, but oh man, I don't know if you noticed on that picture there, I've got a lot of hair. I don't have as much hair now, and it was because those years were really, really stressful. I mean, it never goes away. You're just looping over and over and over again.
And you have 2 kids and a mortgage.
Two kids and a mortgage, and well, I remember just muttering to myself, what am I doing? You know, somebody recommended meditate. It will help with your stress. And so I bought this little phone app, Headspace, if anybody's familiar with it. It's definitely worth it. It really is. And some little gentleman whispers in your ear and teaches you how to pay attention to your thoughts. If anybody's ever meditated, that's what it is. You're paying attention to your thoughts, which was actually pretty interesting because when you have this concept of a resting mind, thoughts just pop in your head all the time. And if the same thought is looping through your head over and over again, that's the problem to go solve. And if that, for me, that problem was, you're not building the right thing, you're not building the right thing. And it was in the manifestation of that question in my head was, what can you build that will make this product work? And if that answer isn't really obvious, like if the product is done and people aren't adopting and you're thinking about what feature can I add, to us, it was not a feature. It was a Control-Alt-Delete. It had to be something brand new. And that's a hard lesson to have. So that's one. Embrace the pain as directly as you can. Bruce and I and Joel used to have these meetings. We still have them every once in a while, called pain cave meetings, where we would just go in and we would just lay out all the bad stuff we could think about and just unflinchingly look at each other and be like, this isn't going very well. Why is it not going very well? You're trying to keep your energies levels up as an entrepreneur to persevere and get through that, but acknowledging the pain may get you to the goal line quicker. That was another thought I had. Let me think. One other one popped in there for a second. It's cliche to say don't die. I don't mean physical. I just mean as like a product. If you can continue to live, that's a good. Oh, I know one more. There are many paths and there are many types of companies, and it's very easy to. I don't anymore, but read TechCrunch or read whatever, and you see about companies that raise money from Kleiner or raise money from whatever. They're running this path. All paths don't have to be that way, right? As soon as you raise money, institutional money, you actually are on a particular path. So before you do that, really try to map out the path you think you're on. Do you really, really believe that this is a company that is going to be able to generate $100 million of revenue and exit this way? Do you really believe that? And if you don't try to go that path just to stay alive, right? It could create heartache for you. You can build a great, $10 million a year business. There's profits involved. You don't overhire. You don't have a lot of people. So you just need to know what kind of business you're trying to build. I think that's something.
Final question before we open it up to the audience. Thinking about the Atlanta perspective, what can we do better as a startup community? What are some things that you'd like to wave a magic wand and see happen in Atlanta?
So I don't know that Atlanta has found its angle yet. And what I mean by that is, the valley has its angle. The valley's the valley. Everybody knows that. But I've been spending time, because we've got some customers out there in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City knows what it is, right? Salt Lake City is a fantastic inside sales organization. They've got the models, they've got the people, the schools are cranking out people. Every one of my customers, I sit down with them and they basically say, you're crazy not to have a sales office out here. And they all collectively say that. And I think if some other entrepreneur were to come to Atlanta and say, what should I do in Atlanta? I would say, Atlanta's awesome. Like, it's a great place to live. It's a good lifestyle. But I don't know that I'd be able to say that here's the skill set that Atlanta is going to hone for you, and you're going to be able to just get up and going. I think that I think that the elements of that are there. I don't know how we get everybody on the same page with that. I would love for Atlanta, for example, to say we are the computer science place of the world, as an example, right? We are the data analytics place of the world, and here's why. Georgia Tech is doing this, these 3 companies are doing this, these 3 organizations are doing this. I just think that finding that soul would be important. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's give Scott a round of applause.
Thank you.
And then we have time for a few questions. Who wants to kick us off?
Hey, Scott. Thanks for the partial story.
Thank you.
So I noticed on your website, I haven't used your product, but I'm sold on it.
It's a shame. You absolutely should.
I will. You have a free solution, a pro solution, and an enterprise.
Yes.
Tell us about the journey of figuring out freemium to premium.
Yeah.
And how did you figure about it? What are the best practices? What did you do wrong? All of that.
That is a great question. I will tell you that I spent an hour and a half today in a pricing reconfiguration meeting because we still don't feel like we have it right. I think that no one ever feels like pricing is right. I go back to if you're selling to businesses, I can't say I know anything about consumers, selling to consumers, B2C stuff, but if you're selling to other businesses, don't start free, in my opinion. Because even if you quickly go back to adding freemium, right? Start by understanding the soul of the business by making sure that customers will use it, find enough value to give you some non-zero amount of money. I don't even know if it's $10, that might be fine, but something better than free. We got such bad signal with Homebase because I did the same thing. I went around with a pitch deck and I would talk to people and be like, here's the set of problems. Is this a set of problems for you? Oh yeah, this is a set of problems. Would you use this product if we launch it? Yeah, we'd absolutely use it. Totally different from, would you buy this product? So when did we decide to launch free? I think we had been in the market for a full year and change, and we launched the free version for two reasons. One, we had seen great success with word of mouth, and so we wanted to just goose the word of mouth, and we knew where the snap lines of paying customers and not paying customers were. We sort of had a sense who our influencers were, which is who we wanted to drive additional word of mouth. And they were small startups that we were that small startup for we didn't have enough money to pay. And so as almost a gesture of goodwill, we wanted to give it back to them. The other reason that we did it is because the mission of the business is to make the web better, right? Every one of you are users of the web. You try to buy things at times. It is horribly frustrating. And so by giving FullStory away, we think that will just kind of do our little part in that regard. As we have evolved the business, especially as we have layered on a sales team in the last year, that pressure that we experienced with Derek is back again, right? And I can't tell you, what we have seen is that close rates are higher. Win rates, close rates are higher when you get a salesperson involved. Retention rates are higher when you get a salesperson involved. ACV is higher when you get a salesperson involved. That doesn't change the fact that the soul of our company is still very much about building products and wanting thousands and thousands of people to use it. So we're really going through a lot of thought on how do we draw those snap lines yet again, where there's a group of people that don't ever want to talk to a salesperson, right? Many of you don't ever want to talk to a salesperson, and we get that. We want you to be able to buy the product on your own without that. But we also want a good ACV, and we want you to have a good experience. And it's true. I mean, it took us a while to realize this, but a salesperson is really, really helpful at helping you understand all the nuances of the product. In the earliest days of the product, it didn't do much. It was pretty simple. It was like, record the thing, hit play, there's your product. You don't need much training. We've got lots of long tail features now that a sales rep can get in there and help them understand it. That's going to be better at retention. So it's a meandering question. We don't feel like we have it on lock yet, but we hope to one day.
Awesome. Next question.
First, I've been a user twice of FullStory. We had it at one company, we got acquired, took it to the other company.
Nice, that's great. That's great. See, it happens.
Great. FullStory seems like a classic, hindsight is 20/20 story. Like it's like, duh, it makes sense, right? At what point in that journey that you described, which was long, did it click for you when you said we got it?
Well, so two clarification points there. One is, there was no aha moment, this is the idea. I wish I could say that there was just a light bulb, but it was a slow drip of knowing that Homebase wasn't quite right, and then thinking what could be right. It was a little bit freeing to say, we're not thinking about pivoting the current product by adding a couple features, by saying, let's start over. What in the world could we build? And we looked at other products that were in the world that we thought were interesting. There was one that was doing a plug-in-less co-browsing feature for support teams, but it didn't do it retroactively, right? And yeah, we knew that it was right. I would say maybe the first tweet that somebody was like, this thing is awesome. It was somebody that had found it on their own, tried it on their own, said that this was awesome. You're like, okay, yeah, this is right. I will also, during our Homebase journey of pain, we met with, there's this gentleman, I don't know if he still is, but he was the CEO of Hortonworks, Rob Bearden, who was out in Social Circle, Georgia, and he was a venture partner for, gosh, I don't remember who, Sequoia or Benchmark. And somehow we got connected with this guy. So Bruce and I drove out to Social Circle, and you kind of have to meet Rob to know, but he's very much, he's an imposing figure. He's like a cowboy. He lives his office is on a farm. He is super savvy. And we took him through the Homebase deck, and he looked at us and he was like, I can kind of see it, but what's the invention, guys? And that question really just echoed in our ears for a long time. It wasn't really in it. Like, what we were building with Homebase was not an invention. It was just sort of some workflow on some existing stuff. FullStory, when we went out to build that, we were like, we need to do something that's different and hard, and we're not absolutely sure it can be done, but we've got this great team. Let's go try something hard. Let's try to capture all of the data and put it in an index. Yeah, meandering, but that's the answer.
Question in the back? Or right here, Jeff?
Sure. Hey, Scott.
Hey.
I have an agency called 352. We've got about 20 of our clients
Yeah.
as FullStory users, so absolutely love the product.
Thank you.
The biggest thing that we like about it is when when a customer reports a bug or an issue, and one of our developers' response is, "Oh, that's not possible," which is clearly,
Yes.
we say, let's go watch the videotape and
Yes.
see if it is possible. And 99 times out of 100, the developer is stunned as they go, well, I don't know how that possibly happens. And the error is fixed 5 minutes later. My question for you, I know you guys are hiring like crazy this year. I've heard with the new funding, you guys are almost like doubling in size. What's that process been like, and how have you had to kind of change your people ops in order to accommodate all the new hires?
It's a great, first of all, thank you very much for being a customer. I appreciate it. That use case you mentioned, that may have been the aha moment. By the way, it was Springbot in Atlanta, and Joe talked about taking FullStory to one of his Russian engineers, and the engineer had this great accent, and Joe would do the accent and with that use case. So for starters, we hired a fantastic head of people ops, and not surprisingly, she was an ex-Google person, and it's really easy to think of HR and just, this is people that are doing the benefits over there, and they're, if somebody needs to, it's not what that is. Like, it's crazy that for most SaaS companies, our biggest asset are our people, and those people need to operate with each other, and they need to be taken care of, and all of those things. And so people operations is the right phrase for that. And so Gabby came in, and that's the head of people's ops for us, and just really helped us think strategically and structurally about how to organize the company. And we're still iterating through that, but starting to hire more clear practices is what we would call them. So we did not have a product manager in the organization until about 2 months ago, and now we have a product management practice. We just hired our first product marketer, and so adding those functions where, again, it was something that we just used to, everyone in the organization used to just chip in and do those things, we're now starting to form these things where people can focus on these things day in and day out. It's great to have people there doing that. coordinating those people across each other is something that I think we're still starting to work on. And then the only other thing I'd add in is when we're smaller, everybody feels like it's part of a family. You know, we have our weekly all hands meeting, and we have all of these kind of quirky processes that were easy when you were small, but as you get bigger, you don't want to lose the magic of that, but you want to keep the processes in place. And so trying to figure out how to iterate an OKR cycle is something where when it's a team of 30, it's easy to run OKRs. When it's a team of 100, it's different. You have to structure it in a different way.
Hey, Scott. I love that you brought up, taking the company to the next level. So the wannabe IPO company or whatever, however you said that.
Yeah, wannabe.
Yeah, right? And so I'd love to know specifically, what are some things that you're doing and some of maybe your co-founders, your executive team are doing to take it up to that level and hoping that the team follows, sees that, and I'd just be curious to learn more.
Well, it starts at the highest level. So we try to treat our board as if it were the conference call that you would do if you were a wannabe public company. That means you're getting your metrics and your KPIs in order, and you've just got a lock on all of the assumptions that drive all of those things. And that does not happen overnight by a long shot. So we've got a really strong head of finance that is helping drive some of those. We've started to bring in operations people within each organizations to drive metrics back up. That's been one. There's a level of thinking about the future that we haven't really had in the past. At the beginning of 17, January 1, 17, you're thinking about February 17. And now we're thinking a bit further out in terms of our modeling and the pieces that you have to put on the chessboard in order to try to track to a $100 million company. Anecdote, I was in Australia last week for a conference, and where in the past I would have gone to that conference to go to a trade show and meet some customers and do some things, I went down there now and I thought about, okay, what would it look like for FullStory Australia? When would that happen? How would we hire? When would we do that? Finance person, let's go ahead and start to put that plan together so we know when we want to snap and put that in place. Things like that.
Awesome. Let's give Scott a round of applause.
Thanks, everybody.